Greetings from Castle Goring, from Mickey and Sleepy Aurora, and from me. Well, without further ado, I'm going to plunge in with what Loving to Travel has asked. Hi, Lady C. Will you be doing a press tour for the new book? Where can we find out what TV shows you will be on? I am not doing a press tour. There's no need to do a press tour. I am going to be doing interviews with various channels, YouTube channels primarily, which of course then the newspapers will be picking up. I'm not going to be doing any so far that I'm aware of. There is actually there are two possibilities actually. There are two possibilities depending for television, but I'm being very measured and very careful as to what I do, because I do not intend to give jerks the dagger with which to lacerate me and create where some rotten journalist along the lines of Philip Schofield creates a sensation, and it's his bad behavior that becomes a story instead of the book. So I'm not having it. I have had to endure enough of that in my life. Unfortunately, I'm no longer in the position where I need to do stuff like that, and I'm not doing it. So, fortunately, because I have all the strings to my bow, I can, and we have set up interviews with various YouTubers, etc. And doubtless they will be picked up the way they always are by the press. But as for the press, there are two possibilities, and let us see if they materialize. Because the good old days of me being obliging are, I fear, over. So I think you can, by the way, get the book to pre-order it on amazon.co.uk. And I believe that you can also order the ebook. I've never bought an ebook in my life, so I'm afraid I'm no expert on that aspect of it. But I hope that helps. And now we are going to plunge in with some rather weighty matters, as well as hopefully some entertaining matters. We'll start off with the Witcheroo, who says, Lady C, do you know why Ted Sarandos is being awarded Commander-in-Chief of the Order of the British Empire? Thank you. I think you mean Ted Sarandos, I suppose is the way his name is pronounced, or maybe it's Sarandos, I don't really know. And quite frankly, I couldn't care less if the truth be known. He is the head of Netflix. He's been the head of Netflix since 2000. And he has been the one who has greenlighted such programs as The Crown. He was appointed co-chief executive officer in 2020. He shares the position with Greg Peters, who was formerly the chief operating officer and chief product officer. And I'm going to read out what Ted Sarandos had to say, or Sarandos, whichever his name is. I really should have checked it out, but I didn't, sorry. The UK's creative brilliance, quality craftsmanship, and best-in-class production facilities make it an extraordinary place to invest. We couldn't be more excited to be part of the creative community here, and this is a real honor. Well, okay. Well, let me put it this way. The honor has not been bestowed by the crown. That would be the Royal Victorian Order. It is bestowed by the Honours Committee, by the politicians, and doubtless the people that he has encouraged, I'm sure with loads of favours, to put his name forward, and he has duly been honoured. Now, I have nothing against him being honoured, because the fact of the matter is he avails himself of the facilities in this country, and if he's going to be rewarded, fine. But it is mighty peculiar to people who don't know how the system works to think that the CEO of Netflix, which produced The Crown and which the royal family actually dislike intensely, because they are now fully aware of the fact that the average person in India, in Malaysia, who has watched it, believes that it's the gospel, even though it is utter rubbish. Who also was given honours, and they were made a knight and a dame, are Christopher Nolan and his wife Emma Thompson. She is the producer of Oppenheimer, and they have been honoured because Oppenheimer has been so successful. You know, we have a political class in this country that is so busy sucking up to celebrities and people who can feather their nests for them, that they jump on every populistic bandwagon. We haven't had a conservative government in this country for years. We've had a Labour-light government, and we're going to get a Labour-heavier government, presumably in a few months. And all I can say is I do not see that Keir Starmer can possibly be any worse than the successive governments and the antics that the Conservatives have pulled in the last few years. I deeply deplore the way they have conducted themselves. And they haven't done a very good job of ruling the country either. I just say that for what it's worth. And let's see if the Labour government is going to be any better or if it's going to be worse. Because some of the rubbish that the Conservatives have come up with will hopefully not be exceeded by rubbish from the Labour Party. Scotland Forever says, Lady C, what do you make of our First Minister's law on hate crimes and J.K. Rowling's invitation to the police to arrest her? Can you believe this is happening in our wonderful country? Yeah, I can believe it. I can believe it. I think it's terrible that it's happening, but I can believe it, and I do believe it. Well, Hamza Yusuf, to those of you who don't know who the First Minister of Scotland is, oversaw the passage of the hate crime legislation at Holyrood in 2021 when he was Justice Secretary under Nicola Sturgeon's government. Nicola Sturgeon, who has been disgraced. And we have Hamza Yusuf, who steered this through. It is deeply ominous because it doesn't only refer to hate, it refers to abuse. But the words, the actions are never defined in the statute, so they can be anything. I also actually have to question, why are governments feeling able and compelled to tell people how they should feel? They should be able to tell people what they should do with their feelings, but they shouldn't be able to be telling people how they should feel. It is such an encroachment upon people's civil liberties. Of course, Mr. Yusuf doesn't think so. He claimed that the legislation was needed thanks to, and I'm going to quote, a rising tide of hatred against the people because of their protected characteristics. Well, I'm sorry. In a free society, you should be able to hate anybody you want. But that doesn't give you the right to violate their rights. They don't have a right to being loved. And everybody should have the right to hate those who they wish to hate. But they should definitely not have the right to encroach upon the civil liberties of those whom they hate. We are on a very slippery slope in this society into absolute totalitarianism, and we need to be very careful. The Police Federation said that the act was a recipe for disaster, and of course, Hamza Yusuf disagrees. He couldn't disagree more, he said. Of course, there has been appropriate training in place, but also police officers have been dealing with hatred for many, many decades and have been doing it very sensibly indeed. Then he said that there had been an offence of stirring up racial hatred since 1986, and there was absolutely no evidence to support warnings that there would be a large increase in the number of vexatious complaints. Then he says, unless your behavior is threatening or abusive and intends to stir up hatred, then you have nothing to worry about in terms of the new offence that has been created. If your behavior is threatening or abusive and does intend to stir up hatred against Jews or Muslims or disabled people or gay people, then I think the law should protect those people who are the victims of that potential hatred. All very noble, you would think, except Peter Tatchell, who, to those of you who don't know, he is a gay activist and he was a former MP, and he's actually very sound and solid in many of his views. He has said that he finds it an astonishing exclusion that women have been excluded from this act. I also find it extraordinary that men have been excluded from this act. Are we to believe that men are the only people in society who hate? Tatchell also criticised the legislation for allowing, well, I would actually say encouraging, third-party reporting from complainants who feel uncomfortable dealing with the police. I mean, it's unbelievable. So you now have more than 400 sites which have been designated as hubs, including at a shop that sells bodies, let's put it that way, and sells the products of pleasure for bodies. A mushroom farm, a caravan park. And Peter Tatchell has quite rightly said, with anonymity being granted, this could open the door to vexatious and malicious complainants who will go after people and use the third-party centre as a way of getting back at people. Obviously, it's a recipe for vengeance. But Hamza Yusuf says that disinformation is being spread about the bill and what it entails, claiming that there is a triple lock of protection for free speech. We'll see about that. It includes a defence for the accused's behaviour being unreasonable, and that the act is compatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. Well, J.K. Rowling, and good for her, she waded in and she wrote and said that the Scottish politicians have placed, I'm quoting, placed higher value on the feelings of men performing their idea of femaleness, however, misogynistically or opportunistically, than on the rights and freedoms of actual women and girls. It is impossible to accurately describe or tackle the reality of violence and something violence. Sussex is the end syllable of Sussex. Violence committed against women and girls, or address the current assault on women's and girls' rights, unless we are allowed to call a man a man. Well, she then said, freedom of speech and belief are at an end in Scotland if the accurate description of biological sex is deemed criminal. I'm currently out of the country, but if what I've written here qualifies as an offence under the terms of the new Act, I look forward to being arrested when I return to the birthplace of the Scottish Enlightenment. We really need to actually recalibrate our society in terms of decriminalizing certain feelings and certain rights that people should have. People have a right to feel how they feel. In fact, you could say people can't help how they feel. What they can certainly help is how they act upon that feeling. But of course, the police are so busy catching out people for really what are non-crimes that have been criminalized, that they can't be bothered to do any work on real crimes. So you have rampant violence throughout the cities, you have constant theft, and you have burglary taking place as if it were not a crime and as if it did not violate the people who then lose a lifetime of possessions and memories. You begin to understand how sometimes people call for strong leadership, because this is all just ridiculous. But let's wait and see. Let's give Hamza Yusuf the benefit of the doubt, though it is validly arising as, and let us see if it becomes a nuisance charter, because I can tell you the very fact that people can now denounce people anonymously and that the police will be going after these soft targets means that it is already a charter for abuse of innocent people. But let's see. And I think what really has to be addressed seriously, and in fact hammered home, is the fact that this bill does not, this act actually, does not exclude what you say in the privacy of your own home. You can say something to someone in confidence, and normally in bills of this kind, certain environments are excluded, such as the home. Not in this case. So not only can they, if you say something that they decide is encouraging hatred, even though you may simply be expressing your point of view, because it then is open to interpretation as to what encourages hatred and what encourages abuse. So if you say something inadvertent on the internet to someone or in an email, and in the safety of your own home, even in your bed, you can be done. Sorry, this is a little bit too reminiscent of Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia. Not even Leninist Russia was as bad. And I shouldn't say Russia, because it wasn't only Russia. It was the whole of the Soviet Union. Not under Lenin, but under Stalin. And I remember the person who helped me to adopt my boys, she said people were very careful what they even said to their own husband or wife, and especially in front of their children, because there were many cases where couples spoke freely in front of their children, who then turned around and denounced them. Do we begin to see the severity of what is happening? I mean, it is absolutely frightening. And, saying that, as Hamza Yousaf is trying to say, it won't be misinterpreted. I'm sorry. In this country, if you drive without due care and attention, you will be committing an offense. What does without due care and attention mean? It means anything the court decides it means. So you're eating a piece of fruit, they can decide that's without due care and attention, notwithstanding the fact that you're fully attentive. Because most people can actually masticate and drive at the same time. But this is how a vague law is open to not only interpretation, but willful misinterpretation. All to further the illusion that some members of society are being protected. No, all members of society are being endangered by laws of this nature. That's my take on it. Tisha Pratt says, Harry and Meghan looked like such a sparkly couple at the wedding, but it sure did not take long for the cheap material they are made from to tarnish. Absolutely right. You know, the reality of a person ultimately always rises to the surface. The public only need to interact naturally with a public figure for any length of time and to see them perform in either unscripted ways or in ways that they themselves have chosen to have scripted, for insight to be obvious. I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. The only person in the public eye that I know who was able to dupe the public for the length of time he did was that creature, Philip Schofield, who duped the public for a very long time, but then he was to an extent scripted, and he also was extremely deceptive. He was a practiced deceiver. He had spent much of his life living a lie and continued to live a lie for much of his life, and doubtless would have continued to live a lie, except that the person with whom he had involved himself ultimately let the cat out of the bag. But Harry and Meghan, well, we have seen Harry's change of personality from when he was, let's see, before Meghan's influence and after Meghan's influence. And yes, at the wedding, they looked somewhat sparkly. I mean, I actually bought the lie, I've got to tell you. I bought the lie. But then I wasn't looking for anything, and they didn't mean enough to me for me to actually bother to do anything except accept them at their own value and presentation of themselves. And she certainly played the demure. Oh, I'm almost a virgin. Yeah, I'm almost a virgin. I'm in white, virginal white, and I'm so demure. I'm Julia Roberts in terms of endearment. I'm just so demure. Yes, I'm just so demure. And quite frankly, it was a convincing enough act to dupe me. But then again, I only looked cursorily at the wedding. I didn't even look at the engagement. But my goodness, didn't she and then he sort of shine a spotlight on to what their true characters are. Sheila Jackson says, people didn't turn on them. Most people didn't give a flip about them in the beginning, especially after the Oprah Winfrey interview or the book Spare. Big mistake. Sheila Jackson, you're absolutely right. I didn't care. And I used to know Harry somewhat when he was growing up. And Harry and William used to play with my boys at polo. So if I didn't care, why would the average person care? In America, I think people distractedly thought, oh, well, it's nice to have an American who's a member of the British royal family. Last time was a disaster. This time is going to be a success. She's been welcomed in with open arms by her own account. Remember what she said during the engagement interview? She was welcomed. And remember what Harry had said before. Because Harry had also said how she was welcomed. And she now had the family that she never had before. Well, that was before the Oprah interview. So they actually had a very fresh, clean sheet, where there was no sleet that would then come afterwards. Because Harry and Meghan, initially, everybody took them at face value, at their representation of themselves to us. It's only as they started to reveal more and more and more about themselves that people thought, what do we have here? And I will be doing interviews this week, which will doubtless be broadcast, that will doubtless touch upon matters such as this. And if they don't, my book certainly does, because Harry and Meghan have gone out of their way to present themselves as victims, when in fact all the evidence suggests that they are self-motivating perpetrators and persecutors. Margot Churchill says, I completely agree with you about the beauty of a soul transcending physical attributes. Sometimes you meet people who initially seem attractive, but their character eventually changes how you see them if they are evil. And the reverse holds true for those who are so good that you begin to see physical beauty that you did not see before. Margot Churchill, I couldn't agree more. I'll tell you, one of the most striking examples to me was somebody who I think many of you will know of, even though you might not know personally. Aristotle Onassis. I first met him at the opening of Numero Uno in September 1968, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure it was September 1968. Yes, it was. He was built like a pig. He was very much like, porcine. He was sort of tight, very sort of tight in terms of looked like a pig, really. The harshness and the tightness and the of a pig. I mean, I can't describe it any other way. Within a few minutes of speaking to him, you realized he was one of the most attractive men you had ever come across. It's extraordinary. His charisma, his personality, you very quickly went beyond this man that was reminiscent of a pig standing up. I'm not saying you thought he was beautiful, because you didn't, but you quickly saw that he was an attractive man. And I'm not referring to anything in terms of the man-woman carnal aspect. I'm just referring to him as a human being. And the last time I saw him was at Sarah Spencer Churchill's house in December 1973. I think he died shortly afterwards. He and Jackie were there for dinner, as were Andy and Geraldine Fuller. I was there. I can't remember who else was there. It was a very small, intimate Sunday evening supper, really. And by then he was really pretty ill. And I think he'd been diagnosed with myasthenia gravis. But even then, he still had a transcendent personality. The opposite is true. I used to actually think that Meghan Markle was quite attractive. Now, I cannot look at her without feeling repulsion, no matter how well presented or photographed she is, even on the few occasions that her clothes fit and that she doesn't have the Medusa tendrils falling everywhere. I find her repellent because her personality repels me. Now that is her gift to me. That is her gift to all of us. She has given us the reality of what she is, and it overrides everything. Elder Flower Water says, Dear Lady C, thank you for coming to us even at Easter. It was my pleasure. I was watching a show about the history of Frogmore and its burial grounds. This, of course, led to the mention of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. Question: had the Duke of Windsor not married Wallis and decided to make a more conventional expected choice of royal bride, who do you think would have been around and suitable at the time? I am wondering not only in British royal circles. After all, marriage amongst cousins wasn't all that rare then, but also in royal families across Europe. Just curious. Warm regards from Australia to you and the fur babies. Andy. Well, there was actually a girl that he fell in love with and wanted to marry. He proposed to her. She was actually a cousin of my ex-husband. Her name was Lady Rosemary Lewson Gore. She was the daughter of the Duke and Duchess of Sutherland. She was a very good-looking. She died in 1930 in a plane crash with the Marquis of Dufferin and Arva and a few other people. The plane hit turbulence and broke up in midair. She by then was Viscountess Ednam. She was married to the heir to the earldom of Dudley. And David met her in France, where her mother, Millicent Sutherland, had a hospital during the war. And David fell in love with her, and she fell in love with him. And he proposed to her, and she accepted the proposal. And the King and Queen, George V and Queen Mary, refused to allow the marriage on the basis of the fact that there was bad blood in her mother's family. That there was eccentricity and quite possibly even madness in the family. They were both devastated because nobody expected the King and Queen to object to the marriage. She was beautiful. She was a lovely, lovely person, according to everybody who knew her. She was warm and kind and loving and great fun and hospitable, and she and he remained friends till her death. He took it very badly, and he decided then and there that if he couldn't marry one of the most suitable girls in the country because of his parents' objections, and he rarely thought his father's objections, because his father was something of a prig, and Millicent Sutherland was quite a girl, let's leave it at that. And and George V was very rigid, and the Sutherlands were very grand and very relaxed. And I suppose what they regarded as madness, we wouldn't regard as madness nowadays. David decided, well, since I can't marry who I want, I'm going to sleep with whom I please. And promptly started a serious affair with Frida Dudley Ward. Thereafter, he never bothered with single women again. He had Frida Dudley Ward, he had Thelma Morgan, who became Thelma Furness, Lady Furness, Gloria Vanderbilt's identical twin sister. Then he had Wallis. I've written about this in one of my books. I can't remember which one. But King George V and Queen Mary, and I don't think it was really Queen Mary so much as George V, have a lot to account for. Because, you see, George V had an adversarial relationship with David. And no matter what David did, he had to object to it. He didn't like the way he dressed. He didn't like the way he presented himself. He didn't like anything about him. And as David went on and on and on, being the most popular Prince of Wales of all time, George V had nothing but criticism for him. Nothing. But David shot himself in the foot because he ended up having a series of affairs with married women. But you can understand it from his point of view. He was very emotional. He was very attached to whomever he was in love with, as has been proven, because he was with Frida Dudley Ward for years. Then he was extremely attached for a while to Thelma Furness, and then he was attached for the rest of his life to Wallis Simpson. She would have made the perfect queen. She was beautiful. She was fecund. I think she and Lord Dudley, as he became, had 3 children, if I remember correctly. And they remained, as I say, good friends with David. One of the what ifs of history. You know, George V was quite the martinet where his family was concerned. His children all paid a price, but so did the nation. And on that note, I'll say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please keep the questions and comments coming in so I will know what you would like us to be speaking about. Okay? Thank you. Take good care. God bless and bye-bye. And if you have truly enjoyed this, would you care to like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and Godspeed.